All right, so we talked about sorting options. Now it's time to talk about filtering. And filtering is one of the most common and powerful tools that you'll be using constantly when you analyze data with pivot tables. And we'll stick with our title column here and just drill down into the sorting and filtering options. And in this lecture, I'm going to talk through two components here. I'm going to talk about this manual selections box here at the bottom, and then we'll go into the label filters, which are filters that are triggered by text-based criteria. So starting with the manual box here at the bottom, as you can see, it shows me a list of all of the values in the column, in this case, several hundred unique movie titles. And what this option is great for is if you want to pinpoint one or two titles to show in your pivot, or on the flip side, if you want to show your entire list with the exception of certain titles. And this is a great way to enable very manual subselections of your lists that you maybe can't capture with traditional label or value filters. So a really useful part of this tool is the first checkbox that says select all. What that allows you to do is basically toggle the entire list on or off. That way, if I have them all selected and I only want to show 3 specific movies, I don't have to deselect 400 others to be left with what I want. I can toggle them all off and then turn on just the titles that I want. So in this case, let's say I want these 3 titles, 10 Days in a Madhouse, 10 Things I Hate About You, and 102 Dalmatians. I can manually select those 3 and press OK. There you go. On the flip side, I can select all of my titles, deselect those 3, and I'll have my full list minus the 3 that I deselected. So you may be saying, all right, that's convenient because those 3 titles were right at the top, very easy to navigate to. Which is a good point because sometimes you want to find titles that are buried somewhere deep in your list. So if I select all, you'll see that I've got a lot of items. It might be pretty tedious to use this scroll bar to find the exact items that I'm looking for, and that's what this search box right above is for. So if I want to find only movies that contain a certain string or word, like snow for instance, it will dynamically filter that list right here in the view to show me only the titles that meet that criteria. So by default, this box at the top will be checked that says select all search results, and that will automatically apply the selection to any title with the word snow. And when you press OK, you can see there are about 9 titles here with the word snow or the text string snow as part of the title. Now, one last thing to note about that option, if I go back to select all, press OK, got my starting point again. Now what if I want to use this search bar just to find a specific title, but I don't want all of those titles to be selected? So let's say, for instance, we only want to show snow dogs here in the titles. I could search for snow. There's snow dogs right there. But you see that it's selected all of the other titles that have passed the criteria, including dead snow, snow day. If I don't want those, I could either deselect them here, or I could just uncheck that first box and press snow dogs and press OK. So that will filter my list down to just that one title. And to show you the reverse effect, let's go ahead and select them all again. If I wanted to show all of my titles with the exception of snow dogs, I'll go through a similar process here. Search for snow. And now here's the catch. If I want Excel to return the entire list, not just titles containing snow, with the one exception of the Snow Dogs title, I need to select this second button which says Add Current Selection to filter. That way the list that's returned will be the entire list of titles, not just the titles that contain snow. So by checking that box, now I essentially have the entire list selected, and I can go ahead and uncheck Snow Dogs and press OK. And if we select all of A, I can just do a Control F and try to find snow dogs in this list. And as you can see, it can't find it because we've filtered that one title out of the list. So those are the manual selection options. To clear those, you can either press the Select All button at the top or just press this Clear Filter from Title, and that will accomplish the same thing. Next up, we've got label filters, and again, these are any filters that are triggered by text-based criteria. So text that equals a certain string, does not equal, begins with, ends with, contains. And then you might be wondering why there would be options like greater than, less than, or between, which feel like value-related options here. Best way to think about it is think of alphabetical order as kind of a sequence. So if we say show me titles that are greater than B, it will look at the first letter in the title and only give me titles that start with B, C, D, E, and so on. And the same applies for less than or between. So we'll walk through a few examples of those. In terms of equal or does not equal, those are typically used when you want to drill down to just either a single title or an entire list with the exception of a single title. And for those types of tasks, I'd recommend using the custom selection boxes like we just talked about. The label filters that you'll most commonly use are things like begins with, ends with, and contains. So let's start with begins with. It's as simple as this. Let's show only titles that begin with the letter D. Press OK, and there you go. We have all of our D titles listed out. And you can get more specific than this too. You can say, all right, show me any titles that begin with DE. And now it's only DE titles. And you can continue that process, obviously, and get more and more granular if you choose. Does not begin with will essentially just do the inverse. If you choose all the titles that don't begin with D, you'll see all your A's, B's, C's, and then you'll jump straight to your E titles because you've excluded any D titles. Really, really straightforward there. The same logic applies for ends with and does not end with. Contains basically gives you a bit more flexibility to say, show me any title that contains the word night. I don't care if it's the first or the last word or if it's buried somewhere in the middle. It will show me any titles that contain that text string NIGHT. And then last but not least, we've got our greater than, less than, or between. Greater than, for instance, will show me any title greater than or equal to whatever text string I choose. So R, for instance, will give me titles starting with R, S, all the way down to Z. And then between just allows you to put a second criteria onto it. So greater than or equal to B, and between B and, let's say, E. And one thing to note is that the first item is greater than or equal to, so this will contain B titles. The second criteria is just less than. So this will return B, C, and D titles, but not E titles. And you can just play with that and get a sense of how it's working. So B, C's, and D's, there you go. And then the last thing that I'll call out here is that anytime you launch one of these dialog boxes, the actual operator here in the beginning, like begins with or ends with, this is dynamic. So you can actually access all of those operators from within the same dialog box here. So those are basic filtering options. The next lecture is going to talk about how to make these a little bit more dynamic and complex using these wildcard options here, these question marks and asterisks, which is a great way to enable some more sophisticated filtering logic. So let's go ahead and just clear the filter from the title list so that we have a clean starting point. There you go, basic rundown of label filters and manual selections.